Hi, Bev.
Hi, Sam.
Nice to be here with you today. Gail has invited us to have a conversation about our experiences on the doctorate and your experience completing your doctorate.
Yeah, yeah. So will we both, share what it was like for us? Yeah, that'd be really nice in the
Yeah,
discussion. Yeah, okay,
sure.
great.
Um, when did you start your doctorate journey?
It was actually signed on in I started September 2015, but it was
Okay.
quite. It was probably in the spring school or winter school as it was that year. And before that, that was when I knew that I wanted to sign up for it. So
Ah.
spent the summer preparing for that.
So what happened in the winter school that you knew that you wanted to sign up?
It was it was wonderful. It was a really interesting, absorbing time. We had something called fireside chats because it was cold and crisp and beautiful. But in the evenings, we lit the fire in the bar at Breathay in Ambleside, and the people that were there had been from the very early days of the doctorate and from KCC, and they were sharing their experience. And the conversations were just so interesting and absorbing. I felt that sense of community, and I felt accepted, and I felt, just really totally absorbed in it and wanting to carry on to be a part of that.
Okay. Okay.
What about you? What happened for you?
Um, Yeah, so I had kind of gotten the bit between my teeth about wanting to do um, some study at doctoral level, kind of months before I made contact with Gail. Um, but it's interesting for me, there was no other program that was of interest to me other than the Bedfordshire program because of, I suppose for me, it was the written word. So reading about the program, how the program was introduced and language
Mm.
fit for me in terms of how I think about my systemic practice.
Mm.
And then being in conversation then with Gail about maybe making an application, just
Yeah.
confirm that for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think there was something particular about that relationship with Gail for me as well. I think that sense of feeling accepted, because I worked with her for quite a long time before that,
Okay.
and I think there was something about the way she talked about the program as well that really inspired me because I'd never even thought about doing doctorate. I had no aspirations to work to doctoral level, and probably didn't think I was capable of doing it at that stage. But there was something about that. I felt that um, the way Gail talked about the program, the experience at the winter school, and this kind of belief that she seemed to have that I could do it. So communicated to me, and I just thought, oh yeah, well, I'll give it a go. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And something this for me, there's something for in my conversations with Gail about the importance of writing into and exploring into your own practice and kind of reclaiming that ground for ourselves rather than that kind of aboutness research that is, more dominant out there. So it's something about, permission to write into our own practice that I
yeah,
loved in my conversation with Gail.
yeah, totally agree. Yeah, and there was, and I'll share a funny story. Years before, when I went to the systemic interest group in Yorkshire that was held in Harrogate, and John Shotter was there and Harley Anderson, and they were giving a CPD day. Um, and I attended that, enjoyed the day enormously. And Gail invited me for a meal in the evening. So I went for this meal with these people who I revered. Um, and I was sat at the end of the table, just keeping quiet, really, because I was kind of a little bit in awe at that stage. And Gail said, oh, John and Harleen, I want you to meet Bev. She's got some really interesting things to share about the way she's working with reflexivity and personal development groups and the counselling programs. So I remember feeling, gosh, really embarrassed, but at the same time, very excited. And it's that sense of the communication in that relationship that, and in that forum that led me to sort of believe in myself a little bit more and to believe in my practice. Like you said, that it's worth outing this and having a stage for it.
Yeah. So there's something quite special about this program. I think both of us are saying that. Yeah.
And it started for me, and sounds like for you, with those conversations, like with Gail, and the written word and the experience for me. But then it ripples out, and it rippled out on the program, in the cohort, and in the systemic community that I became a part of in that way.
Tell me a little bit about the rippling out into the cohort. I'm interested in that.
What I've realised about myself is the importance of community to me, that goes back to my very early life, the community I was born into, and the roots and the history there. But I felt in the community that was created on the PDSP in our cohort, which was cohort 5, I felt that sense of support and trust, somebody I could go to if I had a problem, but this sense of belief in what I was doing, and acceptance, and people to bounce the ideas off, people I could turn to. And like I said, that's the main thing, really. And it's really, really, I couldn't have done a different program where I was working on my own, say a PhD program where I'm working by myself. I don't think I could have done that, or I wouldn't have got to the place I got to. I don't think, because that whole bouncing ideas off, looking from a different perspective, that those conversations that we had for each of us around our topic and our study, our project, and they really are very, very important in the whole process, I think.
Yeah, and it's interesting you end with the word process, because for me it's that as well. It's not. It feels like I'm engaged in creating something with others and within my own practice, and the with others piece is really important for me too. And you know, I'm in the early days of my second year, but I equally feel that about my cohort. You know, and we've had the strange experience of starting in the middle of COVID, where we haven't been able to come together in a physical room. And yet I feel huge support among my cohort colleagues, and huge sense of interest in each other's topic and how we travel this journey together. And like you, I can't imagine doing this without having my colleagues alongside me.
Yeah. It's great to hear that, especially with the online, that to be able to create that environment, and it's fantastic.
But I wonder about that, because I wouldn't imagine that's always the case. So there's something about how we're held on the PDSP, the bigger cultural piece about how we care for each other, and the community that we create. And in part, for me, that's been about the permission not to be saying right or wrong or the clever thing. It's been, permission to be in the mess of trying to discover what it is you want to study and research and be with in your own practice.
Yeah, I think that's that right-wrong thing links to the acceptance that I feel and did feel from the beginning. So. And it isn't always easy. I mean, it's not been a straightforward, smooth journey. And there are ups and downs and bumps in the road, and messy bits and boggy bits, that you travel through. But to know someone's got your back actually in that process is really important for me and for you, it seems.
Yeah, yeah. And for me as well, that's at all levels. I mean, I think it's there certainly with my colleagues in my cohort, but I really feel that the team within the PDSP are really supportive too, in terms of it's okay to be in a mess and that this is a process. It isn't that it needs to be, you're getting to this point and then you're traveling on to the next point. It's okay if you don't know where you are sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's hard for me as a person because I like the structure. I like to know where I'm going, and I like some sense of order. So that was part of the whole learning of being a researcher, that it is important to have structure there and to have systems with what I'm reading and so on. But it's also important to be in that not knowing position and to be able to just see what happens. Yeah.
You mentioned a few minutes ago there about the winter school and meeting with some people who would have been involved in KCC.
Yeah.
How relevant and important is the KCC history of the programme for you?
To be honest, I wasn't aware of KCC until I started this until I got to that winter school, because my background was a trainings relate. So the systemic world that I was involved in, it was through couple counselling, and I was on an integrative programme. So we did one semester we would look at psychodynamic theories around couple dynamics, and the other semester we would be looking at systemic world. So I think my learning was really around relate and the papers and the materials they would have selected, and joining the systemic interest group talks, and then coming to the winter school, I became more aware of KCC, and I've come to understand them as kind of the elders of the programme, as it were. And being with Imelda and Gail and other people in John Shotter on that very first winter school, I think that was the world that was coming, that was showing that KCC label. That was what I was seeing there at that winter school, that was it. So I'm not really fully aware of the whole of the history, to be honest.
I guess I come in there similarly too. I mean, I don't have a huge awareness of the KCC history, but I know it has been important to name and punctuate. And for me, what I hold is that a lot of the kind of ethics and culture and way of being on this program came from KCC. So it's the roots. And it's important to name and be aware of our roots.
Yeah. I sense that importance, and definitely going to the day that was put on for Imelda, then I really could see that history there.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your research topic and how you came to discover your research topic.
Yeah, so my research topic is all around something called patchwork of practice. This is an exercise that I've devised to facilitate students that I teach who are developing as integrative counsellors. And I'd noticed that they were struggling. We teach 5 different theories on our counselling courses, and there's systemic, psychodynamic, attachment, and CBT, and person-centred. And the students develop a way of working with their counselling clients that is their integration, the concepts they bring together that work for them. But I could see a struggle for them. They were finding this process of integration very difficult because different theories have kind of different philosophies, and they're not always in a line. So, and as a student, you're looking for the right way to be as a counsellor. So there were struggles going on, and I thought about. I've always been interested in that personal professional interface and why it is we work in the way we work, what it is about our personal qualities and our history and our way of being that translates into our way of working. So I devised this patchwork of practice, which is based on actually an assessment tool where people do patches of writing and then bring those together in a patchwork text for an essay or so on a course. But I saw it as patches of experience, or a patch that might be about something that they've read that's really spoken to them, or something that's happened on placement, the counselling or in supervision, so on. And for me, the patches weren't always written pieces. I wanted it to be more creative. So some of them can be messy art or song lyrics or an image from the internet, photographs. Some students actually sewed patches or knitted patches. Really powerful one where there were different knitted squares, some with big holes in them and some with big loops of wool and different colours, and just fascinating what students have produced. And then they write about what that means to them. And so that I initially wanted to research into integration processes and how do people integrate different theories, and is the way I integrate the right way for me, and why am I doing it the way I'm doing it? But it gradually shifted and changed over the first year or 18 months, and it became this patchwork of practice intervention, I'll call it, and that became central to the research. So there were different different patches in the thesis. There's the one describing my research with the students, which is systemic inquiry, but it's got some action research mixed in there as well. There's a piece about my own development personally and professionally, so that's more an autoethnographical piece. There's kind of a bit of a history of looking back at how people develop as relationship counsellors as well. So it just definitely evolved in that. It evolved through the whole process, to be honest, but the topic changed over the first year or 18 months. It was shaped into something much more precise than what I'd started off with.
And I'm drawn to ask you more about that, because that's the phase of my doctorate research that I'm involved in at the moment. Mine is shifting and reshaping. How did you find that experience of those changes, those early 18 months?
That was some of those times I described as messy. When I wanted to be pinned down, what am I doing? I wanted to know what I was doing. And I had to learn to recognise, to stay uncertain and to stay open. And looking back, the process of what I've called the hot seat, which started off just speaking about what I was interested in. And under those, I don't know if you do this, the what, how, why, and who, answering those questions in front of the whole cohort, and then doing that again the next time with a small group, and then doing that again, and recording it, and then preparing for it and doing it again, and then recording it and discussing it with one other colleague. So all of those different stages seemed to shape it, and I became quite clear then that it was going to be around developing coherence between the personal and professional, around that. And then I went to supervision, and my supervisor just cut through this kind of messiness that I was describing in a very long-winded way and said, well, it's really clear that this patchwork of practice is very central to what you're talking about. And you've seen a problem for the students. You've come up with this, and you need to explore that. How is that working? Is it working? What could you do differently? So this supervision was key to then the final title, which was Patchwork of Practice, helping students develop coherence in their theoretical integrations.
Okay. Well, so also about the program, what I'm hearing is the importance of all the layers of consultation that we're engaged in during our research, from our cohort consultations where we're speaking out loud about what it is we're modelling with, but then also our supervision relationships as well. I'm thinking, well, you're my supervisor, Bev, for my studies at the moment, and I'm thinking about great. It's and I've already experienced this, where somebody else in my talking can hear what's starting to become central and reflect that back for me, and how important that is as part of the process as well.
Yes, definitely. And the fact that this all happens in supervision and in a community.
Yeah.
Like you say, you've got those layers, but I guess that's the systemic, isn't it? It's the whole system that's working towards with the research process. It's not an individual activity.
Yeah. And also the other piece for me as well is that in many ways that from very early on we're engaging with our research ideas. And it's kind of like what counts as methodology, whether it's folding laundry and grappling with your ideas, or being in supervision, or writing, or reading, listening to podcasts, watching movies, that it's all engaging with our research.
Yes, that was a surprise for me.
And
we visited, because we were lucky that we weren't in the pandemic, so we visited the Tate Modern, I think it was. We were looking at art, we were listening to films, and really broadening out. And I came from a scientific background, so again that threw me a bit. I was kind of, part of me is thinking, well, why am I doing this? Why am I trying to look at these pieces of art? What's that got to do with research? And so yeah, it was a real change for me to do the research I did, because I linked very heavily to metaphor, with patchwork. I saw the patchwork of the landscape, and the particular painting by Hockney of the rural landscape and the patchwork of fields and woodlands, and a path running through. So when I'd seen that painting, and then going back to the Lake District and climbing a hill and seeing the landscape laid out below me, then I sort of I had that real metaphorical shift, really, between a written thesis and the patches there, and the patches of a landscape, or in that piece of art. So I can see now why it's so important to stay really open, to stay aware, be aware of how's this connecting me? How's this connecting what I'm researching?
Yeah. I guess when I was listening to you talking about the shape that your research took, and the idea about coherence, I was also curious to ask you about how you went on a journey then to have your research methodology coherent with your study.
Yeah. I think what's become clear is, by having this central theme of patchwork, that is what's linked everything. So it's linked the whole idea of nature, which is important to me as a person. It's linked to the patchwork of practice exercise and my practice as a tutor. university lecturer, whatever I call myself. And it linked to the methodology. So the methodology I saw as a patchwork. And it linked to the thesis, so that each chapter was a patch, and they had a theme that linked back to the environment. So there was a theme of meadow for one and woodland for another. So the coherence came through the metaphor, and it was the linking of nature, practice, personal, as in me. So with the methodology, once I'd got the sense of the patchwork methodology, I saw one patch as the philosophy that was underpinning the way I was researching, coming from social constructionism. And then I still wanted the structure, and I was accepting that was important. So I used a heuristic kind of backdrop as well. And then that linked to me exploring my own experience, as well as the students, exploring the students' experience of patchwork. And heuristic has different stages through it. And I could weave then different methodologies in with the stages. Systemic inquiry and the systemic ways of working just really brought such a lot into that as well. So that was another patch, following particularly some of the work that Gail's done, and the piece of writing on the ethics and so on, but also on practicing research. And there was autoethnography for exploring my journey. And when I was working with the students, really, it was action research. Some of the action research came into that because of the whole active reflective cycle. So reflecting on action and on research, and then putting into practice any changes. Because changes came up during the research process. So I would then take those from the research and implement them into the classroom. So it sounds messy, but there were patches of heuristic, systemic inquiry, autoethnography, and action research. And I saw them weaving and joining together and overlapping and so on.
Actually, to me, that doesn't sound messy. It sounds like your methodology was coherent with what you were doing in your practice of this piece of research.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that was important, that it was coherent.
Yes, and it was coherent to the particular research area, as well as coherent with who I am. So with the autoethnography, it was important to use that methodology in that piece.
So you were really present in your research.
Yeah, it's definitely.
How did that come to you? The patchwork of methodologies, and that being coherent with the patchwork that you were writing about?
I think, like you say, I was in it. I was in the research. I think, and using a metaphor for me gave me a way of visualizing my research and the whole visualizing the journey. So in the landscape metaphor, there is a hill. And if I'm up on the hill, I'm looking over the whole thing. So it links to Bateson as well, focusing in and focusing out.
Yeah.
So I think by using the metaphor, I was able to do the link to focusing in and focusing out, but feel it and have a visual image of it, really. So I would imagine myself on the hill and looking at what's happening and what needs to go in here. And then I'd be immersed in it in other times, particularly in interviews, in reflexive writing. I'm really immersed in the process then. So I think the focusing in and focusing out allowed that shape of the patchwork methodology to come through.
Yeah. I'm thinking about all of so I'm at a much earlier place where my methodology hasn't really emerged yet, but I'm really aware of on this program how we're not pulling a methodology off the shelf and this is how we're going to do this, but it is about a process of being with your research and what fits and what doesn't fit and how might it fit.
Yeah.
How might I need to change methods in order that it fits my study?
Yeah. And that is, yes, it's like you're on a path and you're discovering and learning as you walk.
Yes.
So, but being able to focus in and be immersed and see what you're seeing in detail, close up, and then moving out and seeing it in relation to other things, and hearing other voices, I think that helps that shaping.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other voices come in many different ways, from what we're reading, who we're with, what we're watching, who are our research partners. For you on your journey, who were your biggest influences?
Gosh, what? I know I have prepared for this, and I immediately think of what theorists are they, and it's Bates and with the ecology, obviously, and John Schotter, and particularly the dialogical and the fact of, he talks about knowing yourself in context, and knowing the more you can know yourself in context and know your roots, you can be more relationally responsible, does he say? Relationally agile. So moment by moment in conversation or teaching, you can, the way I understand it is you can be able to know yourself and know how you're going to respond, and then switch to responding in a way that's understood by others and that communicates with others. So that thing of knowing yourself in context, then linking to how you are in relationship now, that really spoke to me. But as we've talked around the journey and the research from before the start to the end, my colleagues on the cohort really, as I've said, they were so important. And my supervisors, I had a research buddy who was a friend from my previous training and became a really close friend. We'd meet up each month. So I would be writing a reflexive piece or doing a drawing or some sort of research patch. And I'd bring that and share it with her. And she was on a theological training to become a reader in the church. So she would be writing a patch from her experience on her course and bringing it to me. And that crossover and sharing of ideas was really helpful as well. And friends, sometimes you need somebody who's not involved in this to just talk about what you're going through and what it's like.
Yeah. It's with you in all aspects of your life, isn't it?
Yeah. My partner read the thing. He's not in an academic world, not interested in that world, but he read it, and some of the observations were so helpful. To get a different perspective, somebody who's not involved in that. It's really, really good.
One of the things that I'm enjoying about, being part of the doctorate at my kitchen table sometimes with my kids around, is that it's not something that is separate. It's not something that mum has gone off to do. It's something we're living with in our family. Yeah. The piles of papers are on the kitchen table. Sometimes the other night I was at a seminar with Gail, while I was cooking dinner in the kitchen, and the laptop was open. So it's part of the fabric of how our family is running.
Yeah.
And I'm really enjoying that.
Yeah.
That it isn't something that I have, academically gone out of the home to do. It's something that we're all making room for within the family home.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is part of your life for those 5 years and beyond. And life happens as well when you're on a doctorate. It isn't that life can stop and you just do your research. And it's just not like that at all.
Yeah.
Well, some of the best times for me were on holiday. We'd book a holiday and I would carve out time within the holiday in a beautiful place like Switzerland or Wales and have committed writing time. And then we'd go off and walk up a hill, and do some activity. So,
so it can be part of the nice times of life as well on a holiday. Yeah.
And part of the hard times. My mum died when I was, I started in the September and she died the following February. So she was ill for that first few months.
Okay.
And again, the support of the cohort, the experiencing life and death and researching at the same time was particularly poignant because I was looking at a lot of what had shaped me.
Yes.
Which was my mum and the village where she was born and where her father was born and her mother was born. So I had all of this history that was encapsulated in my mum. And so that added a richness, I think, to that autoethnography. And I think I would really value those overlaps with your research and with your family and your life.
So there's something about, for me, in the uniqueness of my experience being on this doctorate is that all of you is in relationship with this process.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The tough times and the good times and all the times in between.
Yeah.
And I'm reflecting on the importance of having partners on the journey. I'm thinking about big life events happening in these 5 years. You're right, life doesn't stop. So it's so important to have support and colleagues and a community to be engaged with while we're doing this. You don't feel on your own.
Exactly. And this doctorate program allows for that, or is that?
Yeah. Oh, well, or what I really appreciate is it privileges bringing ourselves into all of ourselves into this process. Yeah. So you've completed your doctorate.
Yeah.
What does that feel like to be the other side?
Amazing initially. Quite unbelievable.
When did you finish, Bev?
It was July. My Viva was May 2020, the last year, and it was actually May the 14th, which is my mum's birthday, or what would have been my mum's birthday.
Wow, yeah,
really weird. So she was with me at the Viva.
Yeah, sure, yeah, that's quite a circle. Yeah,
yes, yeah, and then I got the certificate through after July. I was allowed to call myself doctor. And they make it very clear you can't call yourself doctor until you get this sign off from the board, which is how it should be. So initially just and the joy, really such a joy and pride and really happy and everything you'd expect. And then there came a bit of a flatness after that, and not flatness, but just a kind of, where am I? I suppose a sense of loss.
Okay, really, so it's kind of nearly life after doctorate. What does it look like? Yeah. And
I got a change of job role at the time, and so I'm now the course leader of the masters, and it's it's a complex program. It's very demanding. So I think I've moved my energies into work, but I'm just coming towards the time now where I'm thinking of retiring, and along with those thoughts are coming thoughts of, well, what am I going to do a bit more with what I've done on the doctorate.
And what are your ideas about that?
I've written a couple of papers and had some feedback that they've been really useful and helpful for people. I know my supervisor, Liz Day, shared some of the ideas with a supervision team that she's on a program she's teaching on at the Tavistock, and that's worked really well. So I think I really want to share the ideas a lot more.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go to a couple of conferences this year and speak at one of them. I think it's finding different ways of sharing information.
Uh-huh. And you've written for Murmurations as well, haven't you, about patchworks and how to apply it to practice? Yes, yeah, and how to use it in the form of autoethnography as well. Yeah.
So it's getting that message. I'd love to go along to a number of different courses and just have a day with the students and talk about patchwork and get them interested, and because I think that's where it'll spread out from. So the students that I've worked with, I know they're carrying the patchwork ideas into their practice, and they're using it as a supervision tool. They're using it for self-supervision or for journaling, for reflexivity as qualified practitioners. So, and using it with clients as well. So I think it's spreading the ideas really, but it's how to do that I'm not sure which is the best way at the moment.
So your unique contribution and how to be out there and getting it more known.
Yeah.
So that's the next stage, isn't it? That's the postdoctorate piece.
Yeah. And for myself, I think it's where do I take the ecological side as well.
Okay.
Going to look into therapy, ecotherapy, and I went to the ecosystemic day, but look at and maybe gardening with people who use gardening for the mental health, and so I think I'm going to look at it. I've discovered this as so important to me, so I think that might bring the doctorate and some of those personal interests together.
Okay. So along the journey as well, there has been some real personal knowings of what's important to you that have come through the research.
Yeah.
Has your ideas about what is systemic changed through doing the doctorate?
Yes, definitely. Seeing systemic more as a way of life than I ever did.
Okay.
Seeing the importance of the connections and thinking of systems in terms of where I am and how I'm relating within nature, because first learning about systemic and using it in my practice, it's an academic kind of view of it, just systemic theory, as it were. Whereas now I'm thinking of it as a way of life, and the importance of seeing myself just as a part of the whole world and ecology, and so not that separation between academic and nature, but just who I am within the larger systems, and the impact that I have on and the human race has on the natural world has become much more. I know it's in the news and everything, but it's personally resonated with me from doing the doctorate. Yeah.
And our relationships with not just with each other as humans, but with our whole environment.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you were talking to somebody who was interested in starting PDSP, what would you say to them?
I'd try and encourage. I'd try to understand why they're thinking about it, and then to encourage them to do it. I would have to see if why they're thinking about it and whether their expectations fits with what the program brought. I know it's only my experience that it's been kind of a whole life event that you put so well in earlier on, but if somebody's looking for an academic PhD type research experience, then I don't know if it's the right place for them. So I would try and explain the differences between what I've experienced on the doctorate and what I've seen in my academic life where I work. And then, if they're carrying on and doing it, I think what I didn't do at the beginning was get myself organised in terms of referencing and noting of what I was reading. And it's as though the background hard work of getting your soil right, you have to do that first, I think. And then they leave that and keep that going, keep feeding your soil and so on. But then it's that ability to open up and look at these different worlds that are not a part of your familiar. So I had to learn to involve myself in arts and literature, and coming from a science background, it was very different for me to do that.
Yeah.
It's almost like I had to learn how to be a researcher in a different way from, I wasn't a scientist going in and doing this. So, I was going in with myself into this process and using myself as a practitioner and as a researcher. And I had to open up to what's all around me.
Yeah. And I've been experiencing that as being offered more and more permission to explore in different ways that, it's kind of, it's the opposite to feeling like you have a parent who's telling you no and stay safe, and feeling like you're in a relationship where there's lots of yeses. Yes, go try that, go explore that. That's available to you.
Yeah.
And the other reflection that I'm having about that as well is it's about reconnecting with old ways of being, and this is coming from other conversations I've had with my cohorts, where parts of ourselves have been re-emerging, whether it's a previous poet, or reconnecting with the fact that we do actually like to write. Because I think for me there has been a kind of an idea that, well, I'd have to be at a certain point in my career or have certain academic clout before I could be writing about my practice. Where actually just even engaging quite early on in the process of writing has helped me connect with what I actually like to write about my practice. I like to write about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And this is a huge opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and if you didn't have that permission just to go do that, then you wouldn't know that, would you? So,
yeah,
and I wrote poems, which I've included in the thesis, and I enjoyed writing, and I failed my English language O-level, it was then, and so I never believed I could write. So I chose science because I thought, well, I'd be no good at doing English or psychology or anything like that, because you have to write too many essays.
Wow. So I'm thinking, because I know this has been true for me too, is I've had to cast off some of the ways that I have taken on as fact about who I am because of previous educational experiences.
Yeah.
Where there has been a right way and only one way of doing things.
Yeah, definitely. So when I said about get your soil right first, get those systems in place, you know, with the referencing and all of the background, and then open up, it's almost like a butterfly, isn't it? You have to shake off that chrysalis hard coat, and then just you can open your wings and see what's there. And
I'm so pleased I have you as my supervisor, Bev, someone who's going to pay attention to whether my soil is right, because I know that organizational piece is never going to be my strong suit. It's nice to have someone with an eye on that for me.
And
then, like, I'm also just aware, kind of as we come to the end, that, you know, Gail asked us to do this as part of a celebration for 15 years of the PDSP. That's quite something, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a very special program, and the conditions created within that, and fantastic. Allow people to have freedom, like you say, to be themselves as a researcher, as a researcher practitioner.
Yeah. And something that you said earlier, you know, when you were talking about John Shotter and knowing ourselves in context, it kind of got me thinking as well about this program honouring KCC as part of it knowing itself in context.
Yeah. Allow.
So happy 15th birthday to the PDSP.
Yeah, this has been lovely sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Really yeah, me too. Thank you, Bev.
Thank you.